During the pandemic, we saw the absolute breakdown of the separation of powers here in New York State. Unfortunately, many of our colleagues were willing accomplices in that, creating a dictatorship in the name of public health and safety. We've seen the fallout of that time after time, but now we have a new issue. This whole absolute power, the governor taking on not only the role of the executive but the legislative branch, is continuing on now. And in this case, it's far worse because it's being done largely below the radar by the Department of Health to promulgate rules that are a clear violation of the separation of powers. Back in 2020, March of 2020, the legislature voted to give our former governor those emergency powers. And now here we are 2 years later, and we are still fighting to restore the checks and balances that need to be restored here in state government. So today, what we are talking about is these rules. In fact, right now, the Department of Health is meeting to discuss these rules. The whole idea that a public health official could quarantine someone, isolate them, move them to a detention center, essentially, with no due process and with no evidence that this person is a public health threat. Now, why is that important? I think it should be obvious. It should be important to every New Yorker why this is a problem. But for us, as members of the state legislature, this should have been taken up by the legislature with a bill to be discussed and debated. And in fact, there was a bill like that, Assembly Bill 416 by Assemblyman Perry. It's actually been around for years, long before the pandemic. And it basically would give power to public health officials to isolate and quarantine someone without due process. And where did that bill go? It went nowhere. In fact, the sponsor finally pulled it recently because of all the backlash and the controversy. So now, essentially, the governor is taking most of the language from Assembly Bill 416 and trying to make it a permanent part of the New York State Department of Health regulations. This is a bill that was not popular, obviously, and never had a matching piece in the Senate. And now the governor wants to make this law. It is a clear violation of the separation of powers. For me, if this is something that the New York State Legislature, we are representing the people of New York State, wants to do, then bring it forward as a bill. Have it debated and discussed. Pass it. You be the one to tell the people that you report to, the people that elect you, that you voted to have someone quarantined without due process. And if that passes muster, then so be it. But not as a regulation put forth under the radar by Governor Hochul and her Department of Health. We filed a lawsuit, myself, Assemblyman Tague, Assemblyman Lawler, with Attorney Bobby Ann Cox. She's here today also to speak. And we're going to talk about the specifics of that lawsuit and why it's important and why we feel that is a clear violation of the separation of powers and unconstitutional.